Welcome to Abergavenny Baptist Church.
Life, faith, together.
So Matthew chapter 5, verses 27 to 30. You've heard that it was said, "Do not commit adultery," but I tell you that anyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart. If your right eye causes you to sin, gouge it out and throw it away. It's better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. And if your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away. It's better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to go into hell.
2,000 years later, and Jesus' words are just as relevant today as they were when he first spoke them. I mean, he's just dealt with violence and anger, and now he's talking about sex and lust. How relevant is that for our culture? And Jesus starts by quoting the Ten Commandments. And we read in verse 27, he says, You have heard that it was said, and he quotes the Ten Commandments, "You shall not commit adultery." Now, adultery is where a married person has sexual relationships with someone other than their spouse. Or if someone has sexual relationships with a married person. And the Bible is clear. Adultery is simply wrong. Of course, our culture tells a very different story. We're constantly being told that if you want to experience greater sexual fulfillment, you need to have more sexual encounters, more sexual partners, an affair. And we're constantly being told this in films and music and social media and advertising are all pushing the same message. If you want real satisfaction and excitement, you need something new. You need more encounters, more sexual partners. Yet nothing could be further from the truth. The world says sexual freedom leads to fulfillment. Jesus says it ultimately leads to destruction. You see, sex is not merely a physical act. It's deeply relational and spiritual. Sex is a wonderful thing. God invented it for our pleasure. But it's meant to happen within the context of marriage. A lifelong, committed, exclusive, loving relationship. That's why in Genesis chapter 2 and verse 24 it says, "For this reason a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and they will become one flesh." You see, there's something sacred about sex. Sex is about the joining together and becoming one with the other person. And each time we express our love for the other person through this physical joining together with our bodies, the bond and the intimacy between the two grows deeper and stronger. And as we get to know each other more deeply, the potential for true intimacy and satisfaction increases, not decreases. But if you have more than one sexual partner, you cheapen sex. It loses its sacredness. Sure, there might be a lot of excitement and adrenaline initially when you have an affair, but it'll be short-lived, and it leads to destruction, betrayal, guilt, broken trust, damaged families, wounded hearts. That's why God says you shall not commit adultery, not to rob us of joy, but to protect us and to protect our families and to ensure that we can experience the most profound sex within an exclusive, committed, lifelong, loving relationship. But then Jesus takes this command deeper. In verse 27, he says, "But I tell you, anyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart." Jesus is effectively saying that stopping just short of adultery is not enough. The command was never merely to prevent the outward physical act of adultery. God is always interested and concerned about your heart. You see, long before adultery started long before the affair. Adultery starts in the mind, in the imagination, in the heart. It starts with lust. Now, Jesus is not talking about normal human sexual attraction. Otherwise, we're all in a lot of trouble. You know, sexual attraction and even sexual temptation is very normal. Temptation is not a sin. We live in a world that is saturated with sexual temptation. But being tempted is not the issue. The issue is how we respond. Lust is when we entertain those thoughts, when we let them linger, when we start fantasizing and feeding that fantasy. That's lust. There's a famous proverb that's attributed to Martin Luther who says, "You can't keep a bird from flying over your head, but you can keep it from making a nest in your hair." The meaning is you can't stop temptation from entering your mind, but you can choose to not dwell on it. You can choose to not entertain that thought. And Jesus says lust is dangerous. Why? Why is lust dangerous? Well, firstly, lust trains the heart towards adultery. When someone continually entertains lustful thoughts, all the inner elements of adultery are present except the opportunity. When the heart is ready, the action will follow as soon as the opportunity presents itself. As the old saying goes, sow a thought, reap an action. And if we repeatedly think about something, that will determine what we will eventually do. That's why lust matters so much. It's preparing the heart for action. It's the root of adultery. Secondly, lust is addictive. Lust will never satisfy your desires. Rather, it will just increase your desires and you'll be wanting more and more. And so when you start lusting, you would want to lust more, and so you will lust. It's a downward spiral. And if you keep on choosing to indulge in that kind of thoughts, you'll end up enjoying fantasizing. And it will become a chosen habit. You will become addicted to lusting. And so the more you lust, the more you're going to want to lust. Thirdly, lust distorts true intimacy. Lust promises intimacy, but it actually destroys it. Because lust turns people into an object for your self-gratification rather than someone to genuinely love and care for. And fantasies always create these unrealistic expectations that no one can live up to. And our culture continually presents and creates artificial images of beauty, romance, and sex which no one can live up to. Social media, films, pornography, advertising, even romantic novels create fantasies that are detached from reality. They're not real. And so when we start fantasizing, it becomes harder to appreciate real intimacy. It becomes harder to appreciate the real person who's in front of you. Lust distorts true intimacy. Fourthly, lust shapes who we become. Some people might claim, but lust is a completely private matter. No one gets hurt. But private choices shape our character. What we repeatedly do in secret will shape who we become. As the old saying goes, sow a thought, reap an action. Sow an action, reap a habit. Sow a habit, reap a character. Sow a character, reap a destiny. And lust really remains entirely private anyway. Because it forms your character, it starts leaking out in your behavior. Inappropriate comments, sexual harassment, pornography addiction, and possibly even adultery. But even when it does remain hidden, it still affects your heart. And God is not just concerned about our outward action. He's concerned about our heart. He's concerned about who we are becoming. So how do we overcome lust? And is it even possible? Well, Jesus says it is, and he gives us some shocking practical advice. And we read in verse 29 to 30, it says, if your right eye causes you to stumble, gouge it out and throw it away. It's better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. That's Gehenna. That's that fiery rubbish dump outside Jerusalem. If your right hand causes you to stumble, cut it off, throw it away. It's better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to go into hell. Again, that's Gehenna. Now, of course, Jesus is exaggerating to make a point. And so we shouldn't take Jesus literally here because, well, if we took him literally, it doesn't actually solve the problem. Cutting off body parts is not going to be the solution. If you gouge out your right eye, you can still lust with your left eye. So that's not the solution. Jesus is exaggerating to make a point. And his point is this. You need to take drastic and radical action. If you want to overcome lust, you need to take drastic and radical action. What action? Well, firstly, ruthlessly cutting things out. It means there may be things you need to ruthlessly cut out of your life. Certain websites, certain films, certain social media, certain habits, perhaps even certain environments and relationships. Only you know what causes you to stumble. If the internet is a source of problem for you, put restrictions in place. Use accountability software. Give someone permission to ask you hard questions, an accountability partner. Do not merely wish things were different. Take radical action. Jesus says it's better for you to lose a body part than for your whole body to be burnt in the fiery rubbish dump. It's better for us to cut out certain things in our life than for our marriage and our family and even our life to be destroyed by the burning passion of lust. When I was in South Africa as a youth pastor, I would often have some young guys come to me and ask me to pray for them in this area. And what I soon kind of discovered is is they didn't really have the resolve to change. They were merely hoping I could pray and then lust would just disappear as if by magic, without them having to really do anything. And of course we need to pray, but we need to be praying that God will give us the resolve to do what needs to be done. That we would pray, that we would have the resolve to switch off the TV, to avoid certain websites, to choose not to entertain certain thoughts. Secondly, we need to redirect our mind. The reality is we all have sexual desires and temptations. We all want to look, but we can choose not to. We can choose not to entertain that thought. How? Now, this is quite important because when we try not to think about something, we end up thinking about it. So if I say to you, whatever you do, don't think about an elephant. Whatever you do, don't think about an elephant. You probably immediately start thinking about an elephant. So the solution is not to try harder and harder not to think about lustful things, because then you're just going to end up thinking about them. The solution is to refocus your mind, redirect your mind. You see, God has created us so we only have the ability, particularly men, to think about one thing at a time. And so when a lustful thought comes into your mind, the best thing to do is to immediately think about something else. Focus your mind on something else. Do something else. Refocus. Redirect. And it's an ongoing battle. We live in a world that is full of sexual temptation, and so it's an ongoing battle, but it's a battle you can win every day with every choice. One choice at a time, choosing to look away, choosing not to feed it, choosing to redirect your mind. And the more you do that, the easier it becomes. It becomes a habit. Lust can become a habit that's very difficult to break. But you can form a new habit, a habit of refocusing your mind, redirecting your attention, and that too can become a habit. Lust can become habitual, but purity can become habitual too. What happens when we fail? And there will be times when we fail. And when that happens, the answer is not despair and shame. It's confession and grace. In 1 John chapter 1 and verse 9, it says, if we confess our sins, he is faithful and just and will forgive us our sins and purify us from all unrighteousness. Do you notice that word, purify? When we confess our sins, God doesn't just promise to forgive us, but to purify us, to make us new, to make us clean. And through Jesus, we receive forgiveness, restoration, and purity. We become new again, as though there was no sexual impurity within us whatsoever. Now, this does not mean that we minimize sin, but neither does it mean that we live in shame and guilt. What it means is that we bring our failure into the light with honesty. If you want to overcome lust in your life, you need to tell someone. A trusted friend, a spouse, a pastor, an accountability partner. Because sin grows in secrecy, healing starts in honesty. And then secondly, we start again. We choose purity again. We choose faithfulness again. We choose to guard our hearts again. And following Jesus always involves choices, daily choices, small choices, repeated choices that form our hearts and characters. Because Jesus is not just interested in behavior modification. He wants transformation. He wants peoples whose hearts are who genuinely love purity and faithfulness and people. He wants to change us from the inside out so that we can be the salt of the earth and a shining light for Jesus.
Thank you for watching.
For more information, please visit our website, abergavenybaptist.co.uk.